Grayson Grundhoefer joins us, SicEm365.com. He joins us on the show as he does most every Friday. Grayson, spring football's what? Come back from spring break and then get close to getting into things at Baylor?
That certainly is what we all believe to be the case, and that's normally what it is. But still no official date has been set yet. My guess is next week will kind of be a little bit of a, break week coming off of spring break. And then I'm guessing it'll be that following week is when things start getting ramped up. But again, nothing official quite yet has been announced, but I think that week is probably the most likely one that's going to be targeted.
You never know, because they've been kind of a yo-yo, 2-7, 12-2, 6-7, 3-9. Then last year that surged to end up 8-4 to 8-5 and the loss to LSU. So you would think that the history has said that they will trend downward. I don't get that impression. I surely don't expect that at all this year.
I certainly don't either. And, I'm actually going to have an article on SicEm365 coming out next week as we kind of transition into football from basketball. And it kind of speaks to that. And I think a lot of what we saw from this Baylor team last year was just the thriving offense towards the end of the season just really take off. And then when you look at kind of what Baylor returns, the production, the amount of players on the offensive line, a starting quarterback, really good playmakers. When you look at Bryson Washington, Josh Cameron, Ashton Hawkins, Michael Trigg, there's this foundation that is there because of how many guys they're bringing back that really makes you feel very comfortable that the offense is going to be really, really good. And I think it's also important to mention, this is Jake Spavital's second year. This is Mason Miller's second year. This is Keenan Hall's second year. A lot of these guys, they had that first year, and it took some time, obviously, early in the season, and then it all came together. So really, I don't think there's any reason to think that they might not be able to take a step forward, right? And Jake Spavital, I know, talking to Colt Barber and I during the season, mentioned that, his best offenses typically take off in year number 2. And so I'm very curious about that and see what direction it goes in. This is a team that averaged nearly 40 points per game through the last 7 weeks of the season, including that bowl game. And so there's a lot of expectations, I think, and those expectations, like you said, they feel right based on kind of where Baylor is at and what they have returning. And now if the defense takes a step forward, that's where you start talking about potentially winning a Big 12 championship or making it to the college football playoff. Because if that happens, it really feels like things could definitely come together for this team this season.
Grayson, we went through the schedules of every Big 12 team. Now we're on to the ACC. But going through Baylor's a couple weeks ago, they didn't get the toughest possible schedule they could have, but they're not really done any favors by it. I mean, Auburn, SMU, and Arizona State are 3 of the first 4 games. Do you kind of feel like we'll know who this team is really, really early as opposed to last year when we found out who they were late?
We definitely will. And I think last year it was interesting because, their team, really it was just their schedule looked so much more difficult in the second half of the season. And then it turned out that really the first half of the season was when they played the best teams they were going to face. When you look at BYU and Colorado, and of course, they unfortunately had to play Utah when Cam Rising was, not hurt, which was rare. No one else really had to deal with that. And so, I think this schedule definitely will test them early on. And as you mentioned, going through Baylor's schedule versus the rest of the Big 12, Baylor's kind of holding the Big 12 up with these non-conference games. You look throughout the conference, and there are a lot of teams that are scheduling no one in the non-conference. And I know this is scheduled years in advance, but frankly, some of these schedules are pretty embarrassing. what some of these teams are scheduling in their non-conference, especially compared to what Baylor is scheduling when you're talking about an SEC team. And then, of course, the team that was in the college football playoff last year on the road. I mean, that is really a daunting task. And you mentioned their first conference game of the season is against the team that won the Big 12 last year. So, yeah, we're going to know a lot very soon. And also don't forget, they play at Oklahoma State, and then they play K-State, who is right now one of the top 3 teams per, betting odds for the conference. So a lot in that first 6 weeks that's going to determine a lot of things for Baylor. And I think it'll answer a lot of questions that we have about this team as well.
So on the hardwood out in Kansas City, the men's basketball team saw their tournament run come to a close against Texas Tech in a thrilling loss. I don't know that losses are thrilling, but you get the point there. An exciting finish to that game. They come up short after being down in a hole early on. Grayson, March Madness is next. Anyone's guess right now or projection as to where they land and who they play and all of that. But how are you feeling this week about Scott Drew and Baylor men's basketball?
I mean, I think that their performance against Texas Tech was an encouraging one. And of course, beating Kansas State was another one that I think, again, it solidified things in my eyes about them being a tournament team without a doubt. I think they're going to be in the NCAA tournament. Question is, what will their seeding look like? I think as of right now, my projection would probably be a 10 seed. That seems to be the most likely outcome at this moment. But, watching Baylor over these last couple of days, I think it's apparent that they're still playing hard. It's apparent that, there's still a buy-in from the team, from most of the team. And I think, getting to see a performance like they had against Kansas State where they played a complete game, which really hasn't been the norm for this team. And then they go face Texas Tech, and Tech makes 10 threes in the first half or whatever it was. And then it's, you're fighting this uphill battle, and they just kept fighting. And I think that's great to see as you get ready to go into March Madness and go into an NCAA tournament, because I do think if this team does catch a team sleeping, then there's a chance that, maybe they fight long enough, or if a team, gets ahead of them, they've shown the ability to come back in some of those games. They've also been blown out a few times. But I just think in general, it speaks to just this team not giving up, Scott Drew's culture that he's instilled. I think all of that was very apparent in that Texas Tech game versus a Tech team that is really pretty good this year. They're a good team, and I think Baylor competed really well. Norchad O'Meara had a just astounding game. I mean, he was so good in this game, and he's been so consistent for Baylor all year long. They're going to need more from him, and they're going to need more from really everyone. They're going to need Langston Love to actually play. He didn't play in the Texas Tech game. They really are going to need everything to come together if they want to make any sort of noise come tournament time, and really any sort of noise would be just getting out of first round. But we'll see if they're able to do that. I think the fight, though, is something that I was at least intrigued by because there's not much they can do schematically anymore. Their roster is kind of set. It's really just going to come down to, how much fight do these guys have, and if they can just get hot at the right time.
So what you're saying is, like, basically the one plan has to work.
Exactly. And I think, maybe people who, love, I love basketball. It's always been my number one sport, my favorite sport to watch and to play. And it's just really hard when you don't have the roster to do certain things or to make certain adjustments or to change up personnel. When you don't have the options available to you to be flexible, be versatile, it's really hard to change up the things that you've done all year. And so, they might be able to run their zone, but again, their zone doesn't work as well as it has in the past because they're not as athletic. They're not as long on the perimeter. They can play man-to-man defense, but they end up having to switch everything, which is terrible against a team with a really, really good big. If they end up not switching things, then their guards get eaten up off the pick and roll and the screens from not having the size or the physicality or the athleticism. So when you look at all of those things, it's really like if you face the wrong matchup, it's going to be really hard for this team to make any adjustments in game to really ruin a team's rhythm. And I think we've seen that at times this year. which is kind of why I truly believe this team is going to have to score the basketball really well come March time and come the tournament, and they're going to have to get hot. That's just the reality of it. And to be honest, anytime you're a 8, 9, 10, 11 seed, that's pretty much what you need to happen, right? You need teams that are better than you to have off games, and you have to be able to get hot. And to me, that's really the only way that this happens for Baylor, because again, I just don't see many adjustments that they can make that could really change things for them based on what we've seen so far this year.
Grayson, thank you very much. Appreciate your time as always on Fridays. Grayson Grundhoefer joins us, SicEm365.com on many things was happening with Baylor, but also within the Big 12.